Hey, before we get started with the message today, I just want to give an update on Pastor Stan and Karen. If you guys have been following on Facebook, Karen came down with something like this week where she stands up and her blood pressure like skyrockets through the roof, and spent a few nights in the hospital, like in the middle of it, and they don't know really what's causing it, but they're controlling it through medicine. They're just trying to get those medicine kind of things correct. And there's a lot of tests they're going to be going through and that sort of thing, but that's where they're at this morning. They are home at their house, just kind of recovering, like going through that. If you're here for the first time, Stan, the person I'm talking about, that's our senior pastor, and it's his wife, Karen. And basically, this is why I bring it up. They've been at this church for 40 years, okay? Like on staff for like 30 years. That's unheard of, right? I mean, the average turnover in a church is like 18 months in America. It's always like new people, new things, and they defy those odds greatly. And for as much time as they have spent pouring into this church and into this community, this is the time when we need to like turn those prayers back out, right? And to pray for them. And so if you could do something for me on the very top of your notes this morning, if you could just write down, pray for Karen. And then just use that as a reminder when you look over those notes later on, whatever that looks like, just to pray for them, that God would just continue to guide doctors and that they'd be able to figure that thing out and just get it kind of back to normal. And then here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to pray. Can we pray as a church together now? Let's do this. God, thank you so much for Pastor Stan and for Karen, God. Thank you for the devotion to this church, God, to this community, and just your call on their life to continue serving, to continue working here. God, we just come together as a church family here this morning, God, and we lift them up. We pray for strength for Stan and for comfort, for any nerves and different things. And God, we just pray for Karen, that you would heal her, God, that you would make her strong again. God, that you would guide doctors and diagnosis and treatments. And just as they adjust the medicines to get the medicine right, God, that would just be a process that would be guided by you, and that the doctors would have wisdom beyond even what they should have, God. And we just pray this to you, God, because you are sovereign and in control, and you, God, are worthy. So, God, we thank you for this, and thank you for moving. In Jesus' name, we all pray. Amen. Guys, thank you for that. So today, we are going to wrap up our series called The Power of Choice. And this has been a series, it's about your ability to choose. The choices that we make, the choices that you make, the choices all of us that we make can affect the next 5, 10, 15 years of our lives. The direction that we go, whether we decide to go to the left or decide to go to the right. The decisions that we make shape our futures. That's one of the most amazing things about God's story. God sent Jesus, right, so that we could have a relationship with God. God wants to be in connection with us. That's what Christianity is really all about. But through this process, even though God has provided the way, even though God has provided Jesus so that we don't have to do anything in order to build that relationship to God other than believe in Jesus, even though he's done all that, he still affords us the ability to choose. He teaches us the right way. He teaches us the directions to go. But he says, you actually have the power to choose what your future will look like. And if we have this power, then one of the most important things that we could possibly talk about is, how do we do that? How do we change? How do we choose? How do we build this kind of future? Because I think we want the best future that we possibly could have. And so today I want to talk about something. Today's message is called Bridge Building. And this is one of my most favorite talks to give. I'm here at the church. I'm kind of the discipleship pastor here. And this subject, this thing, is one of my favorite things to talk about. Because if you get this right, if you get this first step sort of thing right, if you get this right, everything else will fall into place. If you get this wrong, you'll be down step 8, 9, 10, and you're like, why is this not working for me? This is the foundation, the first thing. Get this right, and everything else will work. And so here's your first line in the notes. You can't go anywhere without a target. You can't go anywhere without a target. I think we've all experienced this. There's a magical time throughout the day, okay? Especially if you pool together. Normally it'll be like around 11:30, you know, and what starts to happen? You start to get a little hungry, right? Or maybe it's around 6:15, 6:30 that evening. And have you ever been in that conversation with a group of people, and you come into that conversation, you step into it, and you're like, man, I'm hungry. Where do you guys want to go for lunch? And nobody knows. right? So you turn to somebody that's in that circle and you're like, well, so what do you think? And then that person goes, I don't know, it really doesn't matter to me. And then you turn to the one over here and it's like, well, where do you want to go? I don't really have a taste for anything today. And it comes back to you and you're like, well, how about we go this place? And then somebody says over here to the right, I had that a couple days ago, never really happened. You know what I'm talking about? What happens like a half hour later? You've gone nowhere. You're still hungry, okay? You hit it. It's like lunch has started now. We started talking about this half hour ago. I was hoping to have it solved. What was the thing? What was the problem? Nobody had a target, you know? You come into it. I found that it's much easier just to walk into that conversation off the front end and going, hey, I'm going to Chipotle today. Do you want to come with me, right? Normally people are like, okay, then we'll go then. You know, that's the sort of thing. Businesses have found this to also be true. That the businesses that have a target, they have a goal, they're more focused, are more effective. Businesses that are so big that they become departmentalized, where departments don't talk to each other anymore. Money flows in one direction and not another direction. They become ineffective. Why? Because they're trying to be 10 things at once, when actually they're the most effective company if they are one thing at once. What is the difference? As one thing, they all have a target. All departments working together towards one end goal. You know, there's a story, Stan talked about it last week. We talked about Daniel in the lion's den. Do you guys remember that? And there was this king named Darius. Darius was king over Babylon. But when you start the beginning of the book of Daniel, Darius is not king over Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar is king over Babylon. And so you read through these stories, it's like, how did this guy Darius become king? Well, his army overtook Nebuchadnezzar, actually Belshazzar, his son's army. He overtook the city. This city, Babylon, was the most fortified city in the world. The historians record that the walls of Babylon were 36 feet thick. 36 feet. The historians record that if you had a chariot, you could turn the chariot around on the top of these walls. I mean, this city was so fortified. When they heard that Darius's army was coming up, they threw a party. They sat there, they broke open the bottle of wine, they ate their best meal. I mean, they threw a party. How did Darius's army get into Babylon? How did it overtake it? Well, the worst thing you could possibly do in that moment is to do it without a plan, right? Hey, you guys just attack this wall. Let's see what happens. People are up there with like spears poking a 36-foot wall, right? Here's what he did. There was a river that ran through the middle of it. And his army dug a trench from that river and diverted the entire flow of the river into a swamp. And all of his army, tens of thousands of people, walked in on a semi-dry riverbed. Everybody's partying, everybody's drinking, and here's thousands of troops just walk in full battle armor. Why did that work? He had a plan. He had a target. He had a goal, and that goal got him to where he needed to go. Jesus relates this kind of thinking to gates. Here's what it says in Matthew chapter 7. This is verses 13 and 14. Enter through the narrow gate. For wide is the gate, and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate, and narrow is the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. This is interesting. Jesus says that there is a gate, it is wide, it is big, it is the easy gate to find. And if you travel down that gate leads to destruction. That's awful, right? The small gate, he says, this gate is narrow. This is hard to find, and only a few find it, but that is the gate that leads to life. Now, if you were looking back at these two gates, which gate would you choose? You'd choose the gate that led to life, right? I mean, nobody looks at that multiple choice test and, I don't care what A through D is. If choice number E says destruction, you don't bubble that one in. Right? I mean, this is number 2, right? You don't make sure that test gets bubbled in E. You choose anything other than that path. And certainly if one of the answers says life, who doesn't want good life? You would choose to go in that direction. But Jesus says that the opposite sort of thing is happening. Many people are going towards the wide gate, and few people are going towards the narrow gate. You know, it's not narrow. This gate is not narrow just because it's especially difficult. Sometimes you'll look at it and be like, well, maybe it's the narrow gate because it's the harder gate in some sort of a sense. That's not the case. Or maybe it's narrow because it's only meant to be traveled by a few. Maybe God set it up to where only a few could even go down there. That's not the case either. God wants as many people as possibly can to go down that narrow gate. I'll tell you why it's the narrow gate. It's the narrow gate because you will only find it if you set it as your target. You will only travel down it if you look at it and say, that's the road that I'm going to take no matter what. This is the direction that I want to go on. This is my life. This is the end result that I want. Because if you don't set it as your target, guess where you're going to end up? Just the wide gate. It's the easier gate. It's easy to find. It's the place that you will go if there is no sense of direction. But if there is a target, if there is a goal, you will find this narrow gate. And see, here's the thing. We stand before it and we're wondering, how do I find it? What direction should I go? How does it play out in my life? Jesus wants you to choose him for that direction. This is the heart of God. This is who God is and what Jesus is all about. This is really the beauty of who God is. There's a couple of stories that I think really show the heart of God. I mean, there's tons of them, but a couple that stand out to me, especially here this morning. One of them is found in Mark chapter 6. And this is the story where Jesus feeds the 5,000. If you're familiar with this story, tons of people are showing up to see what Jesus is doing. He's making headlines everywhere that he possibly goes. And they show up on this morning and they're hungry and the disciples want to turn them out. And Jesus takes a few loaves and a few fish, blesses them, and they pass it out. And like from just a few, they feed 5,000 people. It's a great miracle. But this is what Mark says. This is kind of like a narrator note. You can kind of see that they were watching Jesus for his reaction. It says, when Jesus went ashore, this is him approaching all of these people. When Jesus went ashore, he saw a large crowd, and he felt compassion for them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And he began to teach them many things. I love this. The story is actually repeated in a different context, these exact words for a different thing in Matthew chapter 9. Only in this story, Matthew says that Jesus had been going from town to town to town, preaching his message, talking to people, meeting people in all these different places, but it says the same thing. Seeing the people, he felt compassion for them because they were distressed and dispirited like sheep without a shepherd. This is really fascinating. So Jesus looks at all of these people, and by proxy, because they haven't set the target to go down the narrow road, where are they finding themselves? On the wide road. They're on the wide path. Only see, here's the thing. When you look at someone, when I think of a coach, when I think of someone who's giving direction for that, maybe it's just my experience. I played football in high school. All of my coaches, when you think about a coach, what do you think about? I think about the kind of person that like gets angry at things. You picture that? Like the person on the sideline that when it's not going their way, when people are not doing what they want, what do? Red, like they turn shades of color. Something beyond, it's like this purple face just upset. I think about that person like yelling at the refs. I mean, that's what happens, you watch a football game. The guy's on the sideline gets a call against him. What is he doing? He's yelling at the refs. I've seen coaches throw clipboards, take their headsets off and bang them on the ground. That's the sort of thing, right? Can you think about that sort of thing? That's not what Jesus does. Jesus doesn't look at people that are on this wide road and say, man, they deserve it. This is the direction you should go. I'm trying to preach to them. I'm trying to tell them things. And look, they've not set the target at the narrow gate. They're just on this wide path. I'm just so mad about this whole thing. He doesn't think that way. What do both of these stories say that Jesus responds like? Both of the stories say that Jesus felt compassion because he looked at a group of people who were directionless, who had no target. And so by default, they found themselves on a road that they never would have chosen for themselves. If they could get that bird's eye view, they absolutely would have chosen the narrow way, but they did not know. And so Jesus has compassion because Jesus is the loving shepherd. This is the heart of God. God loves us. And he wants to give our lives direction. He wants us to choose him for that direction. As a matter of fact, the way that the stories end, this is the whole heart of Jesus. This is a really cool passage. In Revelation chapter 7, this is talking about the end time when Jesus comes back again in heaven and all of those things. This is what it says. They will hunger no longer, nor thirst anymore. Nor will the sun beat down on them, nor any heat. For the Lamb in the center of the throne, that's Jesus, the Lamb, will be their shepherd and will guide them to springs of the water of life. And God will wipe every tear from their eyes. This is the heart of God. What do sheep need? Sheep need something to drink. And so the passage says that's the heart of God, that you would thirst no more. Sheep need something to eat. This passage says that they will hunger no more. That's the heart of God, that you would have all the sustenance that you need. Sheep need shade from the sun. That's the heart of God, that the sun would no longer beat down on them, but that they would find a shady place to rest. That's the heart of Jesus. Jesus is looking out of the crowds, and if you find yourself on that road, Jesus says, I want to lead you to a better place. I want to lead you to a place of life. If you found yourself on the wide road, many do, but there is a better way. And if you set that as the target, Jesus says, I will lead you there. I will shepherd you there. This is the whole point. This is why I came to earth, to do this for you. And there's an amazing thing that happens with sheep who have a new shepherd. Sheep who have a new shepherd have new habits. Sheep with a new shepherd have new habits. What do sheep look like that have no shepherd? They are everywhere, right? I mean, they're all over the place. You know, you're used to seeing, if you see a picture of sheep, you're used to see them like huddled up together. There's some semblance of order and connection and that sort of thing. Why is that? Because those sheep have a shepherd. With no shepherd, the sheep are all over the place. They just eat whatever is next to them until there is nothing, and then they don't really know where to go next. And so some of them go off this way, some of them go off that way. Sheep are so dumb sometimes, they will fall into ravines, they will get stuck in thorns, they will go everywhere, right? They need a shepherd. But the shepherd shows up, and what happens? The sheep get picked up out of the ravines. They get detangled from the thorns. The sheep get led to the better pastures. The sheep get led to the better waters. Their habits change. What their life looks like begins to change, not because they're smart enough to figure it out, but because they are being led now by a shepherd. And see, this is the thing. Our habits set the general courses of our lives. Our habits, what we adopt, what we do. Will we look like we're scattered everywhere, or will we be united towards a target, towards a goal? Our habits set the direction of our lives. I came across this guy. I had never really heard about him before, but I've used his products. His name is Yoshiro Nakamatsu. This guy is like one of the most prolific inventors of the last century. Listen to what this guy has built. He built the floppy drive, the floppy disk. Do you guys remember that? Do you remember when computers had these big old disks and they were like bent, warped? I can remember as a kid being in school and you'd stick a disk into this computer that had like a green screen. Everything was just all green. And you'd play Oregon Trail. Anybody remember that from being a kid? I loved that game. This guy invented that disk that you put in that computer. This is amazing. Among his other creations, listen to this list. He invented the CD, the DVD, the fax machine, the taximeter, the digital watch, the karaoke machine, a cinemascope, spring-loaded shoes, that sounds dangerous, fuel-celled boots, a water-powered engine, the world's tiniest air conditioner. Why? Why? I don't know. Why? A pillow that prevents drivers from nodding off behind the wheel, an automated version of a popular Japanese game, pachinko, a musical golf putter that pings when the ball is struck properly. This guy has invented over 3,000 different things. How in the world did he do this? He has a very weird habit. Check this out. Dr. Nakamatsu believes in the mental benefits of long, airless stents underwater. This is crazy. To starve the brain of oxygen, says the man, you must dive deep and allow the water pressure to deprive the brain of blood. 0.5 seconds before death, I visualize an invention. The Japanese inventor then jots the idea down on an underwater notepad and swims back to the surface. What? So this guy hugs a weight, goes down to bone-crushing depths, and just about before he dies, everything just gets clear, and then he writes it down, swims up to the surface, and then says, I've got it, the world's tiniest air conditioner. Or I've got it, the CD, DVD, that sort of thing. What? But it's hard to really argue against those kind of results, right? I mean, this guy invented 3,000 things by doing this. It's a weird habit, but it works for him. I came across Thomas Edison. That's a little closer to home. Thomas Edison he had this thing for hiring new employees. And here's what he would do. It was a habit. He did it every single time. He would take new employees. And you have to assume that if they're getting an interview with Thomas Edison, they're probably pretty smart, right? I mean, they've got all the appropriate degrees, all the appropriate knowledge bases. I mean, all those kinds of things. They're experts in their fields. Otherwise, I don't think Thomas Edison would waste his time interviewing them. But here's what he does. This is the habit. He would invite them over to lunch. And at that lunch would always be served soup. And he would sit there patiently while the soup was before you. And if you salted your soup before tasting it, you were done. He would dismiss the interview and it was all over. If you would try the soup before salting it, you would get hired. And the reason why is he said that people that salt things before tasting them are presumptuous. And as an inventor, you can't have any presumptions. You have to think, figure things out, test it before you think, oh, this is not going to work. I'm going to need, salt on it or something. But this guy has invented, if there's another guy like that Yoshiro Nakamatsu, Thomas Edison is like him. Tons of inventions, tons of things, and that's how he surrounded himself with smart people that would run his businesses and go forward. It's interesting, right? These kinds of habits for these kinds of successful people. Proverbs 18:9 says this, slack habits and sloppy work are as bad as vandalism. This is it. If you have slack habits, if you have sloppy work, it's as bad as vandalism. So in other words, whatever you're trying to do in life, you might as well just take a hammer to it. Whatever direction you're trying to go, it's as bad as vandalism. Just go ahead, take a hammer to it, beat that thing to a pulp, because slack habits and sloppy work, you're just going to destroy this thing anyways. The opposite of that is true then. Good habits and precise work are good for building up, right? If you notice, you see in parentheses, that's the New John translation, okay? That one's not in the Bible, but I just took the opposite of that verse because this is one of those times that it works. It works just to say the opposite. If slack habits lead you that way, then good habits lead you towards building up. The trouble with this is that this is really hard to do, right? Developing new habits is hard. How many of you, can we even be honest here, how many of us have already abandoned our New Year's resolutions? Yeah, just a little bit. I saw some of you post some things on there. I'm going to drop 10 pounds, 20 pounds, 30 pounds. And I've seen over the last weeks, everybody sharing those tasty videos on Facebook. You know what I'm talking about? Those videos teach you how to make all these cheesy, gooey, yummy tasting stuff that's on there. I know because I watch them, okay? I see, Parmesan cheese bites. Let me click that. Let me watch it. That's the thing. This process, it is hard, but it is possible. Because God has designed you. He's designed you physiologically to be able to change. He has built you in such a way that you can change. You can develop new habits. Physiologically, inside our brain, our habits are like a series of electrical bridges in our minds. This is how you are wired. Physiologically, physically, you are wired. Your brain is like a series of electrical bridges. Your brain has 100 billion brain cells. 100 billion brain cells make up your thoughts, your way of thinking. Unless you've smoked a lot of weed, maybe that's like 90 million now, right? Is that okay to say? Between each and every single one of those cells, however many you have, is a gap, okay? That gap, when electricity comes across that gap is called a synapse. And when electricity jumps from one of those brain cells to the next brain cell, that's actually how you think. And the organization of those cells and the direction that electricity goes is how you have different thoughts. If you think in one direction, it fires this in this direction this way. If you think in another direction, it fires the electricity in this new way. If you want to learn something new, you have to tell your mind, I'm going to try something new, I'm going to try a new habit, I'm going to try a new direction. When you do that, you connect two brain cells that have never touched before. Electricity has never fired between them that way before. This is a new thing and a new direction. And as you practice that thing, you build new connections. You build new electrical bridges within your mind. I found this video, and it's a project that they're working on. They want to be able to go into really remote areas and to build bridges using drones. I thought it was really cool, but I want you to check this out because this is kind of what it looks like in your mind when you're thinking new things. Isn't that kind of cool? Learning new things is like building bridges. New pathways, new connections of brain cells. And every time you practice that thing new, just like the video, it's like you're adding another piece of rope. You're adding another piece of connection. You're adding a bigger and bigger and bigger, more sturdy, every single time, better bridge, better bridge. The more ropes that you would add to that, the better, the stronger this bridge is going to be. And this is really important for us. Because if you choose the new habit long enough, then it will have no choice but to stick. If you choose the new habit, if you choose the new direction, if you follow where God is telling you to go, if you choose it long enough, over and over and over, it has no choice but to stick. You are physiologically designed to overcome any challenges that you want to, guided by our shepherd. He built you that way because here's what happens. Every single time you choose it in your brain, new connections are made every single time, and that bridge becomes stronger. And one day, the new bridge will be bigger than the old bridge. How many of you, we practice a lot of weird things in our life a lot of times, right? How big is that old bridge? Pretty doggone big, right? This is what we've done our whole life. This is the old kind of habit. But if we will walk with God and we will practice the new bridge in a new direction, taking us to a new place, if we will be guided by Him and we will do it over and over and over again, one day with God, the new bridge will get bigger than the old bridge. And then guess which bridge you will choose by default every time? The bigger bridge. This is the promise of God. This is how He has built you to be. Choose the new way. Choose me. Choose this direction. And one day, it will be the automatic result. One day, you will decide to go in His direction over any other direction. And that will become the easier choice. Will we be perfect? No. We're never perfect until we get to be with Him in heaven. But we can look like Him. But we can live like Him here and now. And He has designed us to be able to do that. You know, I don't know about you, but I want the biggest bridges that I can possibly build. And I want to close with this. Just two things. And this is fast, and this is something you probably even know. But let's think about it in a new way. If I want to build the biggest new bridge that I can possibly build, God has set up a twofold strategy that works for every person in every time and every culture. You want to know what it is? Here it is. You need more Jesus. Number one, you need more Jesus. You need more time with Jesus. You need to spend time in his scriptures, in his word. You need to spend time in prayer. You need to spend time connecting with him. Because here's what the scriptures tell us. This is what Jesus said. If you want to know what he's about and you want to know what he wants to do in your life, then Jesus spoke to them saying, I am the light of the world. He who follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Can I share like a personal thing with you? 90% of all the toes that I have stubbed in my life have been in the dark. Surprised? Some of you are like, no. That makes sense, right? 90% of all the weird things I've stepped on, not knowing. I've run into walls in the dark before. Anybody ever done that? You get up at night, you go to the restroom, and it's like you've forgotten how your house looks, you know? You've walked that hallway a million times. Why? Because you're trying to do it in the dark. You flip on a light, and there's no problem. Jesus is saying, you want to build the best bridge that you can possibly build. Do you want to go in new directions? Be with him. Spend the most time with him. He will turn a dark process into a process filled with light. It's who he is. When Jesus shows up, you can see everything. When Jesus shows up, you know which direction to go. Because when Jesus shows up, the shepherd is caring for his sheep. So in every chance, every way, every moment that you can, have more of the shepherd. Have more of Jesus. Here's the second one. We need more Jesus, and we need more Jesus-like people. We need to be around more Jesus-like people. There's a word in the New Testament, and all of these stories about Jesus, and all the stories about what the followers did, and all of this teaching that came because of Jesus, in all of these stories, there is a word that occurs 100 times. 100 times is a lot, guys. This word is called alelon. It's used 100 times, 47 times from Jesus himself, and 60 times from the Apostle Paul. A third of them are about being united. The word is one another. That's what that word means in Greek. It means one another. A third of those verses are about being united together with one another on this journey, connected. A third of those verses are about loving one another, being close enough to people to where you can love them. 15% of those verses are about being humble, because you need humility with close relationships. The rest of the commands are commands like do not judge, because who wants to hang out with those kinds of people? Can I tell you the only way that you can't accomplish these verses? 100 different ones. The only way you can't accomplish them is if you're by yourself. If you are connected to other Jesus-like people, you can do this with God guiding your path. That's what he wants you to do. And can I tell you what the bottom line is for that? Every time you connect with another Jesus-like person, another person, we're going down the same path, we want to go to the same direction, we want to be more like our shepherd. Every single time you connect with somebody like that, the load, the difficulty of the journey, the tough things that'll pop up along the way, all of those things, every single time, the difficulty of that decreases by half. The second you connect with another Jesus-like person, it's 50% as easy. The next time you do that, it's 33% because everybody's sharing it. And every single time, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Why? Because God has designed us to work together. If you want the biggest bridges that you can possibly build, do it with more Jesus and do it with more Jesus-like people. It's the foolproof way. It's the way that he's designed us. It's the way that he's guiding us. Jesus wants you to set a target. He wants every single person in this room, every single person in Manatee County to find the narrow road. To find it, to set it as a path, to set it as their goal, because he knows that he is sufficient enough to take you there. And if you will lean on him, if you will trust in him, if you will connect with other people, I mean, that's what the small group launch is all about. If you will try that, if you will connect with other people in a meaningful way, guess what God's going to do? He's going to help you build a bridge into your best tomorrow. As you become the best person that you possibly can be, guided by the best shepherd that there has ever been and ever will be. That's our Lord. That's Jesus. I want to pray with you.